Unfortunately, I don't expect that to happen anytime soon, so the reality is Lebanon will remain in this limbo for the foreseeable future, remaining this proxy arena for Syria and Iran vis-a-vis Israel, and that situation getting ever more tense with the Iranian nuclear issue and missile issues with Hezbollah and so on, as you've all been following. The risk of war between Israel and Hezbollah, which you heard about maybe in the last talk in this series at MEI, the risk in Lebanon is perceived as very serious and as very high, mainly because of the tension between the U.S. and Israel on one side and Iran on the other, and the fact that Hezbollah is very much part of the Iranian military deployment in the Middle East, and hence, willingly or not, is part of that logic. I think the latest crisis with Turkey maybe puts off or makes a war a bit less likely in the immediate future, because I think it's a bit too much for anybody to chew, or for Israel to chew at this point. So I feel a bit calmer about the summer and maybe the fall, that maybe we'll get through this year without a war. But in the medium, the next year or two, the real question for Lebanon is it going to get through these years without a major war? And this war will be larger than 2006, more devastating than 2006. The political and security outcomes very unpredictable. If that doesn't happen, oddly enough, Lebanon actually is doing fairly well. If the big things don't happen, in the fine or in the small things, normal life, political life, economic progress, Lebanon actually is doing fairly well. The power sharing formula in the government, yes, it's slow, it's fairly ineffective, difficult to get reforms, and certainly impossible to address sovereignty issues like control the border, control the territory, so obvious problems. But below that level of ambition, it does, parties feel they have a stake, everybody has a say in decision making, there's a sense of calm, there's a sense of participation, and that's no small accomplishment for a country like Lebanon, or actually for other countries in the region. The economy, as some of you may have been following, is doing amazingly well. Expected growth this year of 8%. At a time when countries in the region, and of course countries around the world, have had their worst couple of years since the 30s. Banking system very strong, real estate very strong, tourism very strong, and likely to get stronger if we don't have the big cataclysm. It also needs to be said that the country has the highest level of freedom in the Arab world, and civic life, cultural life, is very rich, and Beirut is playing some of the roles it used to play in the 50s and 60s in terms of culture and writing and freedom, and the Arab countries still or again are looking to Beirut. Yes, it's not a model of stability and so on, but it is a precarious Athena, in a sense, in a region which is very, very dark, and where there aren't many glimmers of normal life or vibrant cultural life or vibrant thought. And when you live in Beirut and live in Lebanon, that's really a lot of what daily life is about, and that cannot be underestimated. In the smaller objectives, things that are below sovereignty, issues of fiscal and economic reform, the budget, the debt ratio is declining, which is quite an achievement. It was around 180%. It's now down to around 150% of GDP. Still very high, but credit must be given where credit is due, that despite everything, budget management and monetary policy has succeeded in taking the country in at least the right direction, rather than adding to the debt ratio, reducing it. And that, for Lebanon's basic fiscal health, is critical and very, very important. The country still hasn't figured out how to deal with its energy sector, the electricity sector, which is the main drain on the budget, on the economy. In terms of political reform, although not much reform has been enacted, I would say this government and this presidency and this Minister of Interior, who's a friend and a colleague, many of whom know him, Ziad Baroud, this government and this administration is carrying more ideas for political reform than any in Lebanon's entire history. And that, to my mind, is cause for some hope. And what might be on the table for political reform, which is significant for Lebanon's internal politics, is changing the election law and introducing proportional representation, which will change or weaken the dominance of single leaders over communities. Second important reform, decentralize the administration, which has been a big demand in which the Minister of Interior will propose. A third is considering the establishment of a Senate, a bicameral system, so that the country can begin to move away from full confessional quota system to limiting it to the Senate and liberating the Parliament. None of these are easy, but for the first time they're on the table, and to my mind that's a sign of hope. The latest sort of event which took place a few weeks ago were the local elections. It's noteworthy that Lebanon has regular local elections, regular parliamentary elections. They're considered free and fair, despite disputes about what's the best electoral system. The elections themselves are pretty credible. The latest local elections didn't have sort of very significant political results, but they did show that, I would say in brief, that the dominant parties in each community, while they remain dominant, there is a lot of disgruntlement, a lot of contestation of the dominance of those parties over their communities. That applies. It's not dominance of the leadership, it's not contestation of the leadership of Hezbollah or the Future Movement or the other parties, but a sense that the dominance should be more, there should be more consultation, there's disgruntlement within the movements. The results were not entirely pleasing to the dominant parties or to the dominant players. To my mind, that means that within each community there is a lot of, actually, even when it's not visible, there's a lot of dynamism, there's often alternative viewpoints, alternative will to the dominant party, even among the Shiite community and others which appear very, very solid, except that while you see that in local elections, because you see the small dynamics of politics, in the parliamentary elections, because the election law is so sweeping, you don't see the contestation within the community. But to my mind, that indicates the continuing tension in Lebanon between these oligarchic arrangements of politics and the natural contestation of politics that wants to take place at a local level. So I would conclude my opening remarks by saying that the Lebanese leadership, the Lebanese government, Lebanese in general, are facing this sort of schizophrenic reality that either within months an enormous war will break out and the reality that they live will be devastated, destroyed beyond recognition without a clear sense of what happens after, or this precarious calm in Lebanon's immediate environment will last for a few years, and Lebanon will continue to enjoy the fruits of this precarious calm. And obviously it makes it very difficult for leaders, very difficult for parties to plan when the big issues are not under their control. I will stop there as opening remarks and then try to address your remarks or your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.